PS3 4x3.
Hi friends, I'm Cooper, and welcome to PS3 4x3, maybe the nichest and nerdiest thing I've taken a look at so far in Bears and Games Neo. I'm going to check out 5 games from my collection, 4 pulled at random and 1 a Kubert pick, and see how they perform in 4x3 standard definition versus their usual HD format. The PS3, 360, and Wii U generation was interesting as, especially for PS3 and 360, many players still just had a standard 4x3 tube CRT, and played in standard definition, usually in 480i, via composite cables. This brings up several questions. Were the games simply downsampled and letterboxed from their 16:9 versions? Or was there a separate 4x3 mode created specifically for the game? How does the standard definition game run compared with the HD version? Is the text readable? And the game playable on a relatively small 13-inch Sharp TV? This TV has a good tube, but isn't perfect. Text and white blocks can get distorted on occasion. It's pretty representative of the sort of everyday TVs that folks used at the time, and the kind of thing you can find for cheap or free on the Facebook Marketplace and the like, rather than the obnoxious YouTuber thing of recording off their crazy hard-to-find Sony professional video monitors. Normally I'd call people recording their games running on an SD TV kinda pointless. In this case it's useful to see how the UI translates to the smaller set. I'm running off old GameStop combo system cables that are reasonably good and don't have much interference. I'll use a similar set of cables to record 480i of each game, and just regular HDMI for the 1080p/720p maximum resolutions.
Setting hearts ablaze, the space cyclone!
For the 480i footage, you'll notice interlacing at times, where it looks like there's weird scan lines on movement. This is due to getting a better sense of what the old TV experience was like, and also it could result in slightly different performance than if I'd recorded at 480p instead. Please let me know if you find this interesting. While there are resources online that have gone through this to some detail, there's not a ton on YouTube actually looking at and reviewing the SD versions of 7th generation games. So I'd love to keep doing this, if it's not just me that finds this worthwhile. Please like and let me know in a comment if you want another one, or if you want me to check out the 360 and later Wii U as well. With all that out of the way, let's take a look at some games. I included every physical and digital PS3 game that I own on this wheel. 58 games, barring PS1 and PS2 classics, as they aren't going to run in HD anyhow. Let's spin the wheel. Right out of the gate, kind of a left field choice. Formula 1 Championship Edition, which does not feature M. Bison, Balrog, Vega, and Sagat as now playable characters, was in fact a PS3 launch window racing game released in the last couple of days of 2006. This was one I got as a gift, and it's definitely impressive for a 2006 game, but I found it frustratingly hard at the time, and never got anywhere with it. The couple hours I spent playing it for this video is probably the deepest that I've dived into the game. Formula 1 C is developed by Studio Liverpool, formerly the Psygnosis Group, most famous for the Wipeout games and Colony Wars. F1 games felt a little too rigid for me, and this one's no different. More of a fan of open world racing or city-based tracks. There's the expected full career mode, complete with virtual emails. Racing games still love virtual emails. Please note that checking work emails in real life is already stressful enough. Why on earth do I want to read pretend emails for a fake job? Madness. My real problem with my initial attempts at the game was that I thought I was going to be good right away at F1 driving. And friends, no I was not. Let's not forget this is a racing game in England. Their whole deal is to make games British racing hard, so letting go of my ego and just playing it on easy actually allowed me to progress beyond the initial trials. How about that? These English tech nerds know how to make good-looking games that make the most of the hardware. For their first project on PS3, F1CE is a good-looking game, though a little chuggy in HD, especially when taking turns or a lot of cars are on the field. There's some great early effects. The motion blur, for instance, is fantastic, and the reflections on the cars, helmets, and wing mirrors look great too. There seems to be either a heat haze or a depth of field in the helmet camera view that brings closer cars into sharper relief, which is a neat trick. Another obvious friction point for the frame rate is the somewhat bonkers rain effects and lots of cars on camera. The rain effect and speed-sensitive wet camera/helmet might be kind of overboard though, and make it downright difficult to see no matter what the resolution. but let's check it out in SD. Right away, you can see that there's a custom 4x3 mode that displays both in races and in menus. Yay! But in the career mode emails and in-game, the text size between HD and SD is the same, and the font choice just isn't very legible on the Sharp. Especially noteworthy is that the lap times aren't clearly visible. I had no idea whether or not my efforts were qualifying until the end of the race. Putting the two games up against each other in direct capture reveals a lot. Of course I used the Montreal Grand Prix as the setting, being a noted Quebecer. The motion blur effect doesn't seem to work well with the lower resolution interlacing, but it's there, while the depth of field effect is too subtle to really be seen in SD. Take notice of the performance of the HD capture on the right through the initial turns. There's hitching and stuttering you just don't see on the left. There's also screen tear at times on the right, which is a sign that the game is struggling to pace each frame properly. The SD version isn't perfect, with the occasional stutter like when I hit that wall, but it's appreciably smoother. Now this is a title I'm definitely going to do a full video essay on for Kubert Opens Worlds, and one that I found downright fascinating. It's by developer Pandemic, makers of that Mercenaries game I really enjoyed, and marked the end of the company. Pandemic was dissolved before the game was even released. Pandemic was shut in February 2009, while the game finally released in December. I never got particularly far in this game, and I honestly don't know why. It's right up my alley. It's set before and during the Nazi occupation of France in 1940, and has an incredible art style. In the Nazi-controlled sections of the city, everything is in black and white except for some sharp blues on friendly characters, and the red of Nazi flags, destructible Nazi infrastructure, and the Nazi armbands on enemies. You play as Sean Devlin, an Irish mechanic stuck in the city who has a particular set of skills. While some of the voice acting in the game so far isn't great, particularly Veronique,
I'm coming along for the race. Vittore asked me to take pictures.
Sean's performance is outstanding. Just listen to the disgust in his voice when a Nazi calls him English.
This must be that British mechanic who thinks he's a driver. I'm fucking Irish.
The soundtrack is a great assortment of period-correct jazz pieces and new compositions, and its bold color choices are fantastic. It's maybe most notorious for its part in EA's Project $10. DLC codes included with new copies of the game to encourage buying it new instead of used, which in this case was an option to remove the pasties on the ladies dancing at your headquarters. I mean, sure? It's not a physics-driven playground like the Mercenaries series or other games I may get to in this video, feeling more street-level and realistic until you get to the absolute comic book character villains. But I'm not here to review the game, no matter how foreboding its expansionist global power villains and militarized borders may seem at this moment. You can definitely see some technical issues here in the HD version. Pretty gnarly screen tearing during driving, and very close to the camera pop-in on other vehicles and all shadows. Those trees. Woof, sweetie. Those trees. Didn't they look better in Mercenaries? Maybe not. Also, this game takes the parkour from Assassin's Creed, and adds a strong element of verticality to the exploration of Paris, which I haven't seen in many other open-world games, other than perhaps the Watch_Dogs series. So let's swap over to the SD version. Right away you'll see that the entire game is locked in a 16:9 letterbox. Disappointing. Also, the traditional German-styled font used isn't the clearest on a screen like this Sharp, though it is for the most part readable. Otherwise it looks good and runs smoothly, and a CRT handles the high contrast and use of darkness as well as a modern expensive OLED does. Another disappointment? The draw distance and shadow distance appear to be identical, and yeah, those trees aren't any more detailed or denser. As you can see, there's no screen tearing, and it sure does seem like the performance is just a scooch better in the SD version during the cutscenes. To be fair, the comparison point I've chosen for the video is unusual in that it's full color and daylight, as most of the game will be in darkness later as in the opening. But that's what the game gets for tearing you away from this awesome and interesting city for an hour for some backstory. But don't worry, I'll get back to it later this year for the full cow experience.
Get upstairs!
Let's dance.
Oh no! Another potential cow nominee. As you can see right away, there's plenty in common between Avalanche Studios' chaotic sabotage-based open-world game and the Saboteur. However, in execution, they couldn't be more different. 2010's Just Cause 2 is a sprawling open-world adventure very much in the style of Pandemic's Mercenaries, as you can bounce between civilian and military vehicles, and you are primarily there just to explode all the infrastructure of Panau, under the control of dictator Pandak Baby Panay. However, the action is even faster and more frantic than Mercenaries, feeling far more like Saints Row 2, but with an incredibly useful grappling hook and parachute that can, with some practice, have you scooting around the world without the need of vehicles whatsoever. Basically, it's really cool. Your protagonist Rico Rodriguez is working for the Agency, a vaguely American intelligence bureau to retrieve a rogue American asset. The focus on fast movement and stunt jumping onto vehicles reminds me very specifically of Pursuit Force, to the point where I mixed these two series up, even though that was from Big Studios instead of Avalanche. But the stunt driving is fantastic, and during the game's opening and weirdly difficult chase scene, one that I died in dozens of times recording over the past couple of years, I kid you not, shows the joys of leaping from car to car and taking out its occupants one by one. Also, its Far Cry-style strongholds, though this game really did them first, are guarded by bosses and helicopters that are just as susceptible to being thrown out of vehicles as any regular Joe. I've never got very far in Just Cause 2, and I don't know if this is true for all bosses or just the early ones, but I love how it completely dismantles the concept of bosses and their difficulty. How does the HD version run? Given how much better the environment looks in the Saboteur, and I mean much, much better, you can see this as the forefront of games starting to outpace the power of the 7th generation of consoles. That is to say that things get a little chunky when the action starts to get spicy. It's such a fun game that you don't really notice the frame rate's low baseline and the controls never feel laggy. But on standard definition, there's a lot to say about the SD version of Just Cause 2. Right away you can see it's running full screen, and the fonts used read very clearly on the Sharp. Rad. And while it's harder to see from a screen recording like that, you might already be getting the sense that it's running smoother. So let's do a side to side. First, looking at this cutscene, you can see the HD version on the right really struggling to keep things flowing smoothly, while the SD on the left generally is running without fault. Get into the action, and yeah, this keeps going. It's not perfect, but far more consistent and smooth. I also noticed some difference in the color and lighting of the cutscenes, which is interesting, but I don't know if this is tied to random variants like time of day. On the other hand, during an attack helicopter run on a stronghold, both SD and HD seem to be struggling a bit, which makes me wonder if this was down to CPU limitations at that point. Interesting. Either way, this is some of the best looking natural environments I've seen on PS3. Another thing to note in general, man, those physics are good. Like shooting out the tires and having the Humvees flip at first seems to be a canned animation, but try a few more times and nope, sometimes they flip, sometimes the AI maintains control. This level of physics destruction is impressive today, and it really has only been topped in Red Faction Guerrilla or Burnout Paradise, which does allow for deformation of the vehicle models. I guess Wreckfest too.
Alert! Reports of hostile in the area. All available units respond.
Oof. This game, I picked up when it was on sale for $10 on the PS3 store, after absolutely loving creator Yoko Taro's Nier Automata on PS4. Finding out that the Nier universe's ties with the Drakengard means this is definitely on my list of games to play, but one thing kept me from diving in. His games are devoted to the idea of both subverting your expectations and torturing the characters you love. But not in a bad way, you just have to be in the right headspace for the complete emotional assault these games offer. This begins with the haunting vocals that mark both Nier and Drakengard. Yoko Taro is a master of mood and taking complete control of your feelings. This is bad. He is a villain. Just kidding. Maybe. Now, when Square Enix released Drakengard 3 in 2013, it was greeted by pretty mixed reviews, leaning towards bad. And yeah, you can see one major reason why right away. It runs like garbage. This might be one of the single worst running games on the PlayStation 3, while in many ways also looking like a PS2 release in the process. Like with 2B, Zero is a deliberately off-putting character with her immediate goal, kill all her sisters, alienating you from her perspective. Like with 2B, you get the sense there's much more behind her seemingly sociopathic motivations and spiteful interactions with her poor baby dragon Mikhail, but it'll take time and twists to reveal the truth. I haven't got there yet, but even then there's charm to the defiant punk aesthetic this game offers. I've seen reviews calling the game edgy, but to me there seems to be thought behind this edginess, even if I felt so bad for the dragon wetting himself as Zero berated him.
Knock it off! How many times have I told you? Don't roll around in the fucking mud!
Poor little guy. Oh no! Never feel empathy for Yoko Taro character. Down that path lies darkness.
My name is Pascal. I'm the leader of this village.
Anyway, this game runs pretty terribly in HD, but what about SD? This is another game with a hard-baked letterbox in the standard definition output. Text is scaled along with it, but it remains legible for the most part. Though there's poetry along the side of the screen that's readable in the HD version, but completely not in the SD output. This isn't game-breaking, but does tell me there wasn't a lot of care put into the conversion. The fact that there seems to be no appreciable difference between resolutions leads me to believe this might be a simple case of downsampling. Basically, the game is rendering in HD and then outputting the result in a letterbox standard definition. Honestly, I was expecting more PS3 games to be this way and was surprised how many actually have different display modes for 4x3. The only weird thing? The blood spray effect during combat covers the entire screen, including the letterbox mats on top and bottom. This is the first game we've seen with no advantages to playing in SD. Might as well enjoy the clarity of HD and the HDMI output here, for sure. When you're ready for a game to completely break you, of course. I'm not.
What happens once you pull all your systems?
I eat them. Just kidding.
And now, my choice. Demon's Souls. This is the first game that I've actually put dozens of hours into that we've encountered here. Note that I didn't say I finished Demon's Souls, but I've definitely played a lot of it. My first big dive into a Souls-style game was playing Bloodborne with my buddy Julio during the pandemic, which led me to picking up the game digitally on PS3. Initially, when I tried Dark Souls in 360 back in 2012, I was so scared by everything lurking around each corner that I never got anywhere, and the same with my initial purchase of Bloodborne. But years of trying has at least led me to being far more bold and aggressive in these games in my 40s. I feel like this is the most famous game that I've covered in this episode, so I don't need to go too deep into the history of this as a Sony exclusive release by From Software. You know that it's the progenitor of the Souls series, not counting King's Field, of course. Or Shadow Tower. Or Enchanted Arms.
Your lunch is far better than anything the cafeteria has to offer.
Of course it is. My love for Toya soaks into everything I make.
Wait, no, Enchanted Arms probably doesn't count. This is a game that pioneered a new subgenre of the action RPG, the Souls-like, where multiple runs, patience, and learning are key to progression. Sure, it runs a little chunky, but I love the art and the detail of the environments, and it feels great to play. Honestly, I still prefer the look of this, the original version, to the technically much more proficient PS5 remake. The PS5 version does have the advantage of an active online server, which has been down for years on PS3. And I forgot to talk about the physics. Even on PS3, let's not forget the physics, with so many of the objects around the world being destructible, and with all the bodies being so wonderfully ragdolled. Playing this on my CRT revealed a way that an old tube TV can trick you. It looks so much smoother, but sometimes this can be down to the way the flicker of a television set produces motion. It's hard to show you this without you being here in my bedroom in person, and frankly that would be weird, so either you have to take my word for it, or you have to try it for yourself. I didn't really understand the difference in the way CRT versus modern flat panels display motion until I randomly put on one of Jeremy Parish's videos on my YouTube. On my PS3, playing on my old TV, as one does, he was showing the arcade version of Outrun, and the way that the superscalar tech looked on a flat panel versus on a tube TV is just completely different. Apparently using black frame insertion on a high-end OLED running at 120Hz can replicate this smoother motion, but I need an expensive TV to check that out, and that's not happening anytime soon. There's one thing I'm trying to promote on this channel, it's the idea that you don't need super expensive gear to enjoy retro or modern games. Stacking the footage of the game side by side, between the 480 output and the HD version running through the start of the Boletarian Castle reveals they're pretty much the same. Exactly the same. I was absolutely convinced recording this footage that the SD version was so much smoother, but no. Now, I can be wrong. I'm not using frame analysis tools here, just eyeballing it, but this seems like another game that's running the HD version simply downsampled to SD. Text readability is mixed, numbers and subtitles are fine, but some of the UI is a bit rough to pick out. Overall, still playable. But is there an advantage to playing this in SD? Only in the sense that there's a unique smoothness of motion and inherent lack of display lag on an old tube TV. And that's it! 5 games, with 2 having specific modes for 4x3 gaming, 1 letterbox but appreciably running better in 4x3, and 2 that are pretty much the same both ways. Did you enjoy this video? Want to see me try this with 360 or Wii U? Are there any games you're curious about running in 4x3? Is this an insane level of niche interest? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Please feel free to check out my insane idea to play through every open world drivey shooty crime game and rank them with Coopert Opens Worlds. And if you'd like to see the weird world of third-party Switch ports, check out my Switch reviews. Finally, there's my Bears and Games and Queer History videos, which take a look at the beefy boys of gaming, and just how queer representation has surfaced in games throughout its history. Oh yeah, thanks to Matthew Van Zandt for the PS3 4x3 theme. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and then go to your podcast app of choice and subscribe to Square Roots, a sort of book club for RPGs and other games where Vanessa, Matt, Jim, and me play through classics one chunk at a time. We're playing through Sonic Chronicles The Dark Brotherhood right now, and let me tell you, that game is pretty wild. Goodbye, and I love you. Platonically. Let's not make it weird.
Oh.